everyone, Darcy Pittman here. Welcome back to the NetApp on NetApp YouTube channel. I'm your host with the NetApp on NetApp team, and we're here back for episode 2 of our new Roving Reporter series. I'm happy to welcome Eduardo Rivera to the channel today. He's been in a lot of videos before, but I'm excited to have him here to interview him about our topic today. So before we get into it, why don't you introduce yourself again and remind people what you do at NetApp?
Thank you, Darcy, for having me. First of all, I'm excited to be here. Well, as you said, my name is Eduardo Rivera, and I worked in NetApp IT. Now, within NetApp IT, I manage an organization that we take care or we create, I'll say, hybrid cloud platforms. And what does that mean? Well, we are trying to create infrastructure as a service, containers as a service, all the things as a service that we're trying to build for our application team within NetApp IT to build applications on top. So essentially, we provide infrastructure that is collectively, I can call it IT as a service or infrastructure upon which applications need to build in the form of virtual machines, containers, storage, etc.
So today's topic is object storage and the StorageGRID solution from NetApp. So I don't know a ton about this, so that's where Eduardo's here to explain some of these things to a layperson like myself, and then talk a little bit about NetApp IT's use case, which is, why we're here. So first off, what is object storage? A lot of us know, file storage that we use on our computer, maybe day to day, but what exactly is object storage?
So object storage, right? So what is object storage? I think it's certainly new to a lot of people, depending on where you're coming from. I think if you're our old school storage enterprise administrator like myself, it feels newer, especially coming from the enterprise. But if you're born in the cloud and you're doing applications in the cloud or not, it's not new at all. It's actually probably the one that you use all the time. Now, object storage, I'll describe it as a different way to address a storage server as opposed to NAS or SAN or file or block, analogous terms. So file will be something like NFS or CIFS, while block would be something like Fibre Channel or iSCSI. Object is a different way to address it. And in fact, in object, we talk about S3, which is kind of the protocol we use to address it. I'll talk about that in a second. But at the core, I think the difference between object and, let's say, file, because we use that as a comparison, is that when you look at a file system like NFS or CIFS, you have a folder that you open, there's files in it, you do stuff with it, and that's kind of how you relate to that storage. You have what we'll call a mounted file system that you do stuff with. In object side, on the object storage side, you're really interacting with a remote server, and you're saying, hey, I'm going to put this file, I'm going to get this file, and it's more like transactional that way. And it lends itself to applications to have a stateless connection or a stateless relationship with that object storage. And when I say stateless, I mean like today, when you mount a file system on a server, it's stateful, it's there, you see it. And if that file server were to go away, you're going to have an issue. Object storage is never really truly mounted. It's really more of a remote connection that you do, and you kind of put in and get a onesie-twosie, if you will.
Yeah. So that's all very cerebral, that I don't necessarily have a lot of tangible understanding of it, but I kind of get what you're saying. Do you have any metaphors to help explain
Yeah,
that?
so I think let me see if I can walk it back a little bit. So let's talk about file storage, and I'm gonna use on the technical side, let's talk about it's a CIFS share or SMB share, something that you mount on a Windows PC that's a directory that you access files. So think about that. If I do, sometimes I use this analogy of a parking lot. If you drive your car into a parking lot and you're parking up a particular spot, you know where it is. And when you go do your thing and you come back to it, okay, I have to go to, parking lot B3, space 23. And that's where your car sits. That's analogous to how you perhaps traverse a directory structure and grab that file and say, hey, there's my file. It's under this directory, and just grab it or put it, right? You know a path. On the object storage side, it's more analogous to a valet, where if you walk in or drive up to the restaurant or the store and you give your card to the attendant will give you a ticket and he just parks it somewhere. You don't know where it goes, right? So you're kind of dealing with not knowing where that particular car or object sits, but you get a ticket. Then you can, when you go to grab your car, you can validate it with the valet and he will give you your car back. Now, the difference here is really about how storage is treated and how you interact with it, right? On the one hand, you traverse the directory structure to get your data. And on the other hand, you cannot just interact with the server itself to say, hey, I need this object or this file. and here's the ID or the metadata associated with that file, so you can retrieve it for me. And I don't worry about where does it sit in that directory structure. I'm gonna say more things, but so far, are you with me so far?
I think so. So you mentioned S3, which I have heard about before, but I don't fully understand.
Okay.
So can you kind of explain what is S3?
First of all, S3 is a protocol, right? It's a protocol that we use to talk to object storage. It's not the only one. And also, protocol is, when we say file, for example, NFS is a protocol. SMB is a protocol. When I say block, Fabric Channel is a protocol. ISO is a protocol. It's a language I use to talk to the end storage array on the other side. S3 is one of those protocols that we use to talk object. And that's the only one. There's others, object storage protocols, but S3 is by far the most popular. And it really comes to life because of Amazon, right? Amazon kind of brought it to light when they first went to the cloud. I want to say, don't quote me, maybe 2006, I think is when it came out. But it stands for Simple Storage Service. That's what S3 stands for. And it's nothing other than, again, a language that we can use to talk to that object storage solution on the other side. And it dictates, what commands are supported, what kind of things you can do between client and server. But at the end, that's really what it is. It's a way for us to interact with the object storage.
Okay, yeah, that helps a lot, definitely. So, having said all that, why do we care? Why does it matter? How does this help us? Why is it important?
Well, so to do that, I think I want to talk a little bit, just for 1 second here. I'm going to use the word unstructured data, right? And structured data. So let me define. Unstructured data refers to, well, data that's unstructured. But what I mean by that is like pictures, videos, what we'll say also user-generated content, right? Like all sorts of like random pieces of data that you may want to save somewhere. As opposed to structured data, when I think structure, I think about a database. Think about database, and you interact with a database from either application or user perspective, and you save your records in a particular order, in a particular format, and the database has its own structure. That's structure. Unstructured is, think about like random stuff that we create that we kind of throw somewhere. And that's how a lot of the internet also works, right? When you interact with Facebook or I guess Instagram, they're all the same company, but that kind of company that you're kind of saving your data, your pictures, your videos, whatnot. At the end, those are unstructured pieces of data, and they need to be, saved and put somewhere. All right. That aside, why object storage? Why do we care there? Object storage does really well with unstructured data. Files, on the other hand, file systems like NFS and SID, they certainly handle it. We certainly use it plenty, but there's a point of scale that the object storage can reach that files cannot. I'll give you a quick example. If you have a directory with 100 files on your computer and you open it up, no big deal. They're right there. Same directory has 1 million files or billion files, which is not really that far-fetched these days. You open a directory up, your computer is going to take a very long time to show you, or it's going to create crater, because it takes a lot of processing power to even enumerate and show you all that data. Object storage, on the other hand, doesn't have that issue. It doesn't really have the same concept of a directory structure, the way the file does. And instead, when you interact with it, as I said earlier, you say, hey, give me that file, or let me put that file. And how do you know which file? Well, you're providing to the server certain information. There's an ID associated with that data. And there's also something called metadata, which metadata refers to data that describes the data. Think about it like when you take a picture, you have like exposure information. If you look at your picture file, you'll see there's exposure information, like time of the day, geolocation, blah, that's metadata that describes a file. It's an analogous relationship. But when you talk to object storage, you address your files through metadata or through IDs. That makes a difference because it allows us to really scale very large. So why do we care? It can store lots and lots of data for a very long time, whether they're small files or very large files. And that has been, that was the genesis of object storage. I think back in, before the internet was that popular, it found its first, I'll say, footing in healthcare and holding in radiology images and things like that. So I'll pause there, but that's really kind of the crux of it. It's really about our scale, and it's about matching to workloads that produce a lot of unstructured data that we want to keep and manage over time.
Well, we all need our Facebook and Instagram photos, so definitely important. But let's get into NetApp's StorageGRID solution. So what exactly is StorageGRID? And how does it help people leverage object storage?
StorageGRID is really the object storage for the enterprise, I'll say, and it's our NetApp's, I'll say, marquee object storage solution. So what does it mean for us? It means the StorageGRID is a solution, an ecosystem, something that you can build in your own environment and have your own object storage solution that covers those use cases that we talked about. So that's really at a very high level. That's what StorageGRID is. It's filling in. If you look at a storage solutions, it's part of the portfolio now. Right? We have ONTA, we have E-Series, we have all the things in there. StorageGRID is part of that portfolio, filling in that primary need for object storage on the enterprise.
And so how does NetApp IT itself use StorageGRID? NetApp on NetApp, that's why we're here talking about NetApp IT using its own products. So I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Well, so we've actually been using StorageGRID for quite a while. It's been years in our environment, but also it has evolved over time. I'll start with how we start. So when we first rolled out StorageGRID, our use case for object storage was really about archivals. So we had a lot of, I'll say, long-term archivals that we need to keep for different reasons. A lot of them are, because we're trying to comply with different regulations. So those, that is data that you write once, and you need to make sure it's there. There's a lot of it, and it has to be available, over several years. So that became StorageGRID became a repository for all this archival data that I'm talking about. So that was the first foray into it. But since then, it really has expanded its use. We use StorageGRID as a backend for when customers upload files to our support site for troubleshooting purposes. So you upload a core file or some other data, it actually hits our StorageGRID implementation internally. You may not see it as a customer, but it's what's happening on the back end. StorageGRID has also become a repository for container Docker images that we create. So containerized images, as well as Artifactory artifacts. And we've also been using StorageGRID for more advanced features, like we do background recovery on different sites. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier, but I'll mention now, is that StorageGRID itself has the concept of geographical scale. We can have a StorageGRID, I'm going to use a word that I'm not going to describe, but namespace. We have a single storage namespace, something that you can address as one that spans multiple, let's say, data centers. So that for us is very useful because we can save data on one side and get it from the other. So it allows us to do, let's say, background recovery at different sites. And as we move forward, there's a lot of primary storage cases for object storage where we're matching, let's say, not that we're doing a lot of pictures saving these days, but there's a lot of applications, especially on the containerized side, that are looking for object storage to do transactions or save state or do different things. And so StorageGRID becomes, StorageGRID and object storage itself becomes prime center for a lot of the cloud native applications that we deploy in these days. So it's an evolving story, but that's kind of how we use it today within NetApp IT. There's a lot I can say more about that, but in a nutshell, this is really the use case. And I will say that the capacity and the usage of storage have really exploded over the years. We continue to grow and grow that environment.
Wow, sounds like NetApp IT is using StorageGRID for a lot of different purposes, which is great to hear about. Thank you so much for joining me today, Eduardo. I know I learned a lot about object storage and StorageGRID. I hope our audience did as well. So thank you, and we will see you all next time.
Well, thank you, Darcy. I'm glad to be here. And, if you want to talk more storage, I'll be right back.
I'm sure we will soon. All right.